As the NOPD investigates a fifth officer for potential timekeeping misconduct, a former chief says consequences should run up the chain of command.
Rob Krieger explains in his latest unchecked overtime investigation the devices the department started using to make sure officers show up to work all scheduled and overtime shifts have been in precincts for years.
Fox 8's months-long investigation into NOPD overtime and timekeeping practices showed 4 of the highest paid officers at home while they were getting paid taxpayer dollars. Sergeant Henry Burke now faces 10 felony counts linked to payroll fraud. And 3 others, Sergeants Bianca Boone and Renee Benjamin, as well as Senior Police Officer Brandon Coleman, are all under active internal investigations by the NOPD linked to our reporting. Those findings also prompted the department just this week to mandate the use of biometric time clocks for all regular and overtime shifts. The devices require officers to punch in and out of shifts in the district where they're assigned. Under NOPD Chief Ann Kirkpatrick, they were first introduced only for scheduled overtime shifts following our initial reports in November of last year. But former NOPD Superintendent Ronald Surpass says while the department is just now mandating the use of biometrics for all shifts, the NOPD has had the ability to use them to track officers' time for more than a decade.
We put the biometric devices in the NOPD as I was leaving in 2014. These are not new devices. This is not a new concept. It's not a new tool. What happened is over the last 10 to 12 years, people have decided not to enforce the rules that were in place already.
Surpass says for the most part, the department's policies are sound. The failure comes when officers don't follow those rules.
It's the handful of the people who believe they have some aura of protection, allowing them to log overtime while they're at home, to log overtime when they're out of state, to log overtime 4 and 6 hours at a time when they didn't work 4 or 6 hours at a time. And then supervisors feeling they're under an aura of protection that they can give away their passwords. There's not a citizen in New Orleans understands this. There's not a single person who goes to work every day in the city of New Orleans can understand this in any possible way. There's no way to explain it.
Surpass points to a recent Inspector General letter that said supervisors were sharing payroll login credentials, allowing officers to approve their own time, as well as officers clocking in for work when they weren't in their districts.
We can recognize we have the problem and then ignore it, or we can recognize we have a problem and then take some action to correct it.
Skip Gallagher is an NOPD watchdog who's reviewed hundreds of police time cards. He believes the expansion of biometric time clocks will help, but thinks officers found breaking policies should face consequences.
There is additional problems that need to be addressed, and it would be encouraging to see some of the most egregious people in the force prosecuted.
Last week, the department said it identified potential misconduct related to timekeeping practices with another officer, Christopher Kalka, who graduated the police academy in April last year. In 2025, the NOPD paid Kalka more than $156,000, according to payroll records. That's nearly triple his base salary of $55,791. The NOPD says he's now under active investigation, though Surpass questions why his supervisors aren't also facing similar scrutiny.
The real issue here is that the NOPD's culture, ever since I was a new cop, is to always go to the lowest common denominator and blame them as if there's nobody in between them and the top. It's like saying the plane is crashing. Let's not blame the pilot. Let's blame the person who put the luggage in the plane.
Surpass says the buck can't stop at the officers accused of potential misconduct and believes as the city faces a multi-million-dollar shortfall, City Hall needs to take action.
This isn't a police department problem. This is the mayor's problem that this department, through many years of investigation, has demonstrated its inability to control overtime. It's got to be fixed.
Deputy Mayor of Public Safety Michael Harrison says following our reporting, he met directly with NOPD's top brass and says the Moreno administration is addressing supervisors directly in an effort to create systems of accountability that can be verified moving forward.
We talked about having even further systems of accountability by having the commanders visit those roll calls and to inspect that people are actually punching in using the biometric timekeeping system, and then document so that we can know for certain that people are actually doing it, people are not, and the commanders of the districts and divisions are actually taking accountability and responsibility for their subordinates.
The Inspector General detailed in his letter that while supervisors were sharing login credentials and allowing officers to work from home against city policy, the The overtime costs within the NOPD ballooned from $13.1 million in 2022 to $26.8 million last year. Gallagher thinks the rising cost can be tied to the lack of supervision the Inspector General pointed out in his letter.
This has cost the city of New Orleans tens of millions of dollars over the years that I've been looking at it. And the city needs it now.
According to a City of New Orleans dashboard, overtime spending for public safety is down $8.4 million during the first 4 months of this year compared to the same time last year. Surpass believes if the department's new policies are followed, it will save the city money. However, he worries about the consequences of a drastic cut to overtime.
I don't think there's any question that there will be a savings of overtime. But what often happens in these type of pendulum swings is that since there's no confidence that the police department's managing its overtime, if you read the OIG report, then the pendulum swings so far in the opposite direction that the overtime that is necessary, that is important to save lives, that is important to solve big cases, gets grappled up inside of that cut.
Surpass says between the OIG's findings and our investigation, it's imperative the department prove not just to citizens, but also to the council and Chief Administrative Officer of New Orleans, who controls the purse strings for NOPD overtime, that it can be trusted with the millions of dollars it spends every year.
I mean, you have to have overtime to investigate murders and sexual assaults and child abuses so you can run every lead down. But when you lose that ability to say to the council and to say to the mayor that you can be accountable for managing this money and you don't double it in 2 years, then they're going to cut it off and you're going to have to rebuild all that confidence all over again.
Gallagher says there's only one way to build that confidence: through change.
I'm hoping what we're seeing is some legitimate corrective action to solve a years-long problem.
Still, Surpass warns even as a handful of officers face investigations now, real change can only come if accountability starts at the top.
Everybody in that department knew what was going on. Everybody knew the abuses that were going on. I refuse to believe that they didn't know. But the point of the matter is, when supervisors are told every day they're 600-700 people short, when officers are told they're 300 and 400 people short in patrol every day, it begins to affect the morale of decision making. And for supervisors to give away their passcodes would represent to me a horrible ethical violation of their duty. They should be held strictly accountable so that the officers underneath them don't have to suffer what's coming. No overtime, no opportunity to grow because a handful of people destroyed the place in its practices of overtime.
We reached out to Officer Kalka for comment on the allegations the NOPD has made against him. He did not respond to us, but the NOPD responded saying it would not allow its members to speak to us without express consent from the Office of Public Affairs. Sergeants Bianca Boone and Renee Benjamin, as well as Senior Police Officer Brandon Coleman, also have not offered comment as they continue to face investigation. Sergeant Henry Burke is expected back in criminal court in July for a hearing on his 10 felony counts linked to our investigation.